Here's Paul Preston with Agenda 21.
Well, hello and welcome to Agenda 21 Radio. This is the radio show that is stopping totalitarianism, one exceptional American at a time. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, are you that exceptional American? Well, of course you are. That's why you're listening to Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com. And of course, New California State, State of the Future. And yeah, what a future you have here in New California. Okay, so we have a lot of things to talk about. We've been talking about what's going on in Shasta County earlier in the first and second hour for the most part, trying to figure out what is going on. And of course, massive voter fraud has been reported there. And of course, it popped up last night at their board meeting, a whole number of elements of the massive voter fraud. There's more to come. We're waiting on some more information and some more what we think are thresholds for news for you. But there's an indicator to us, absolutely, there's massive voter fraud going on, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed right now, because you may have the disenfranchisement of all the voters in Shasta County as a result of what is happening, which should mean Shasta County will not be able to certify the elections coming out because of all the fraud. And it's some of it's absolutely willful. There's no question about it. And that was brought up last night at the board meeting. There were deals being done and deals being had without the permission of the board by the former county clerk recorder, Kathy Darling Allen. Very, very serious charges, felonious charges, from what I understand. And legal counsel has advised us that there's major fraud right there. So that's another thing when when your own legal counsel, happen to be a prosecutor, says there's fraud, big time fraud here, then we perk up and we listen. So it's going to be interesting to see in the next 24 to 48 hours where that all goes. But it's looking like there's going to be some real difficulty in certifying those elections in Shasta County, which will be a huge, huge setback for all those people that are into, wanting to use the electronic voting machines and everything to try and determine the election's outcome. And of course, we knew it would come to this. There has been reports of fraud and irregularities all over the place in California through the county clerk recorders that we've been talking to and other people. And some of it's just well beyond their comprehension, which is understandable. Much of the stuff that's being thrown at them is stuff that most people wouldn't, even if they're in the profession, would have a hard time understanding how these things operate and function. And then everybody's lying to you along the road. That's another problem for some of these people in public life. But with us right now is Simone Anderson, and she joins us back here on Agenda 21 Radio. So you're out in the park. It cannot be warm there.
It is 35 degrees this morning, but I didn't want to have communication problems like we did the last time I was on the show. And hopefully you can't hear the guy who just started blowing behind me. Is our sound okay?
Well, can't hear it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
You're fine.
Well, I'm actually coming to you from Shasta County. So
yeah, well, and Shasta County's embroiled in this whole voter fraud situation, and it's quite serious. And I think over time we're going to find out how really, really, really serious it is. But we've been in touch with our own counsel, and they've advised that it's massive voter fraud. So it's okay, not just a little bit.
Yeah, Shasta County's known for all kinds of shenanigans. And so I'm not surprised. I think the 9th District Court basically said in the 90s that our courts just make their own decisions, not related to the law, and they always get overturned when they go to the higher court. In fact, a few times I had some different issues with my estate, with my father's estate up here, and the lawyers in Sacramento and San Francisco refused to take the case because they just felt that it would go into long term because it would probably have a ruling, and then they would have to go to the higher court, and they just couldn't see the value in me suing for the amount, because by the time we went to the appeals court, I wouldn't have any money in the long run because it would just all go to legal fees. So we're kind of known for that. This is the last of the wild, wild west up here. So we have all kinds of, and it's surprising that there would be so much cheating because Shasta County is basically a pretty conservative county. So,
well, it's not the conservatives so much as it is the liberals that have been orchestrating things behind the scenes. It's the conservatives that are pointing it out, and as it works out, the liberals are pointing the fingers back at the conservatives, and it's really kind of interesting. It's one of those. It's really one of those kind of deals, and I do have to say that the conservatives are hanging tight, and I think that there's going to be a resolution. There's going to be an investigation. There's no question about it. Whether or not it's going to be the local people doing an investigation, I don't know, because who can you trust?
Right.
Given the circumstances, that's another big deal. And can you get a prosecution out of it? And I'll tell you, there's ample evidence. It's the will of those people that would prosecute. Do they want to do it?
Well, Shasta County is kind of like a port city where there's all kinds of different activities, because we have the Interstate 5 that goes all the way from Canada down. And there's just a lot of things that go on here. There's a lot of underground economy. It's kind of a meeting place, and it's the doorway, just like the Mexican border is the doorway to Southern California. The Shasta County is the doorway to the rest of the state and the extreme wealth that exists in California. So, of course, anytime there's mass amounts of wealth, you're going to find all kinds of things going on
Sure.
on the side.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what happened in the elections. I think that's what you wanted to talk about today, because you certainly have an opinion on that.
Well, I do have an opinion on the election. I mean, it was pretty surprising, the landslide. I was expecting that. I personally looked at some charts from the last. Have you seen that chart that's going around where they show that the Democrats were down 18 million points from the last election? It shows like the steady Republican votes, but during the Biden election, voter membership jumped 18 million on the Democratic side, and it was about 3 million on the Republican side. So I think a lot of people are saying, where did the 18 million votes go? But I think the 18 million votes, as you explained to me the other day on the phone, they found a bunch of fake ballots coming from China. Last time we had Mark Zuckerberg spending, what was it, like $800 million of his personal fortune to train all of our election people and set up all those boxes outside the election, which was, I mean, since when did Facebook is a government entity controlled by the Pentagon, but theoretically it's a public company. Since when did all these people start having their own voting boxes and training outside the federal government?
I've never heard of such a thing. This is the first time I've ever heard of that. When he started doing it, I'm going, well, it's like you. It's a private company. We know it's quasi-governmental, but it has nothing to do and should have nothing to do with
and
elections.
He's the one who put up all the boxes and trained. Apparently, all the people were being trained, and some of them were getting paid and under the table. I mean, there was extremely so. Now the Democrats are saying, well, there's been cheating. What happened to all these 18 million votes?
Right.
And to me, it just underscores, because for years before it was the same amount of registered voters, kind of went up and down, up and down. But you're telling me Joe Biden, who couldn't get 1% of the vote, all the times he's run for president, got 18 million more votes than Donald Trump? So I think it's a lot more verification that there was a lot of shenanigans that went on in that original vote.
Well, here's the other one, is how in the world does Kamala Harris win anything in California? And she's beating Donald Trump. Come on.
Right.
I mean, this just makes it farcical when you look at this, and that it is a farce as far as I'm concerned, what happened with these elections here. And in the whole state this time, even more so than ever before. It's embarrassing because, you take a look at Proposition 36, and Proposition 36 is, the antithesis of Prop 47. It's there to eliminate Prop 47, which was written by Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, by the way. So you get an indicator of how people feel about Kamala Harris when you realize it's 69% against. Well, actually for Proposition 36, which would repeal Prop 47, and only 21% against it. So, in other words, it's a slam on Kamala Harris. That's what I think the actual vote looks like.
Well,
with,
Kamala
Trump
Harris,
and her.
She's a George Soros puppet. I mean, there is no doubt. She ran against the election. You can go and see all Alex Soros is constantly drooling over here. She's our lady. She ran with no one running against her in the Senate race for California. I mean, that was highly unusual. And then when she came in, if you remember, during 2008, when she was Attorney General, we were going through the bank crisis. And there was over 5,500 indictments because the banks just screwed people and cheated people out of billions of dollars of property. So every county in the state had lawsuits against the banks and the monetary system. And when Kamala Harris came into office as Attorney General, she combined all the cases into one case, then she dismissed it.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
And so she is part of the system. That's why they need it, because California, as you know, is bankrupt. So they have to have these criminals in place that is getting money funneled from other places to continue to overthrow our government till they get us to the point. I was just listening to some economists today, kind of segueing into what we were, the economy. And basically, Karl Marx's strategy is that we needed to have some sort of capitalism for people to grow and have things so we could then take it away, and they would beg for socialism because they had just lost everything. And this is really what we're in now. And this is what's super scary, is this been done so many times, and we're really seeing the fruition of Karl Marx's plan. He was a brilliant person. I mean, he was a disgusting person personally, and I don't agree with his views. But even the top economists today still who disagree with him completely, understand that he comprehended topics unlike any other economist before his time. So, of course, I don't want his theories implemented, but he really did explore aspects of economic theory that had never been explored before.
The Soviet Union, at the time, Khrushchev, back in the 50s, said that, the perfect economic model is communism. And of course, that didn't work out in the long run. But the point is it's your point about what was going on with Karl Marx and how they perceived Karl Marx and what they could do with the economies.
Well, the point of communism is to enslave the society. Communism is new slavery. These people that made their fortunes and their family fortunes generationally were constantly linked to slavery. And just the feudal system that existed in Europe was another kind of slavery. So communism is really about how to get all of the power in one place to control the people. And all of the different mechanisms they've used, communism, fascism, feminism, all came out of these same group of German, Austrian, French thinkers in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. And these people all happened to be from wealthy elite families who were losing power. And right. Also, if you understand the Federal Reserve System and the connection to the Vatican, right? First, they spent a few hundred years murdering everybody who wouldn't consent. Like, a lot of people don't understand why our relatives came and left in masses to a country on a boat where they didn't know what was happening, because they killed 111 million people just in the Inquisition. And so then the Catholic Church, after that, it's kind of the same track that the Muslim faith, the leaders, not the regular people. Whenever I'm talking about the political structures, not our friends and neighbors and relatives that belong to these groups.
Right.
They always have a where they kill everybody who might reject. And then they come in and they start acting like they're caring, and that they're going to give help, and they're going to have orphanages, and they're going to help people have food. So after they kill 111 million people, now they're concerned that the rest of the people are eating and that their children are well educated. It's kind of the same thing where we see all these elites, from the Harris to the Biden family to all families on both sides of the aisle. They're all big philanthropists now. Well, you had slaves for 500 years and raped and pillaged these people, and now you're all of a sudden concerned about them and their descendants? It's just a trap, because these people want control, and they've had control for a long time. And that's really what we're fighting. We're not fighting individual governments. We're fighting this mechanism of control. And that's really what is going on right now in the United States. We just saw that people are overthrowing it. But you and I have discussed before, yes, we've got issues with the border, we've got issues with our military, but the real issue is the financial crisis that the entire world is in via the Federal Reserve System and the easy money that every government in the world has just been printing and printing and printing. We have printed more money in the entire history of our country in the last 15 years. And both parties are guilty of this. So
yeah, there's no question that the parties at play here are guilty. They're all guilty. There's no question about it. And go ahead.
We've experienced the largest wealth transfer in history since Obama became president, and I'm including under Trump's presidency. He spent $8 trillion. Every time you issue money, you devalue the money that you've already got. And so this is what we're seeing. You may be aware of like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. Before every major stock market crash, as long as I've been alive, both of them have sold out. They both have been selling large percentages of their holdings. I just opened the news this morning when I first got up at 6 o'clock, and Bill Gates is saying there's going to be a financial collapse. So this is their remedy to get us further into the system. And this is what we're really fighting, is the Federal Reserve Vatican system, who is printing money, and they're slowly taking all of the wealth because the money they're giving us is a note. It has no value. And this is really the demon that we're going to have to face. And I know a lot of people are encouraged. I think it's been a great morale booster for people. But everybody now thinks, okay, we have new people in power and they're just going to fix everything. We can go back to watching football all weekend and doing that. And this is just the beginning. And that's what people need to get their arms around, because we're in such deep trouble that it doesn't really matter who the politician is. And I personally think they've been tiding it over and pumping money into the system. And once Trump gets into office, I think that's one of the reasons he's putting so many key people into places and talking about cutting. Sure. Well, the government's bankrupt. They have to cut. It's not Elon Musk. It's not any of those people. It's the same in California, right? We're bankrupt. We don't have the money to pay all those employees. And if our economy sucks, what do we need all these regulatory commissions for and all these things anyway? Because there's nothing happening in our industry. It's just a big weight. And this is intentional because, like I said in the beginning, they give you a taste of capitalism. So when the system fails, you're begging for the government to step in. And that's what we saw. Like, a lot of people were really happy about Frank Dodd. That was the legislation that was passed after 2008 because they didn't want the government bailing people out. I mean, this was the biggest shenanigan of the bankers, because what Frank Dodd did is the government can't bail you out anymore. Now the bank can take the depositors' money and give them worthless shares in a bankrupt company. So Frank Dodd sucked royally. I know it's not a very polite word to use, but it did. And it's created a lot of the issues that we have right now. And if you talk to anyone, like I was talking to a guy who's a shareholder, a Silicon Valley guy, who's a Silicon Valley banker in that Signature Bank that went out. And I was explaining to him buy-ins. He was completely happy when he met me. I've never heard from him again.
He's done. You're done.
When I explained to him, oh, yeah, you've got some stock in a bankrupt company that the major banks are going to buy up for pennies on the dollar, and your stock's going to be worthless. I literally have like stock certificates this thick of deals I worked on or deals I got stock for. And I think I've told you this before. I'm putting an outhouse on my property, and I'm going to line the walls with all my worthless stock certificates just as a joke.
Yeah. That's
the only
kind
thing
of
you can do is laugh about it, because crying doesn't really help.
Yeah, that's kind of an old tradition in the West to line your outhouse with stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
That's kind of funny.
being in the mining industry, I've probably been in more outhouses than a lot of people,
Yeah,
and going
exactly.
to mines in foreign countries and stuff that are way out in the middle of nowhere. And so, yeah.
Yeah, one of the captivating places in California is Bodie, California. Have you been there?
Where is it?
Bodie, Bodi.
Oh, no, I haven't. Where's that?
It's off of 395 over by just north of Mono Lake,
I see.
and it's really very fascinating. It's an old gold mining town, and they left it, and of course when they left it, they left it. It looked like circa 1890. So buildings are completely filled with furniture and bric-a-brac and all that stuff left over from the people that were living there. It's an arrested decay, as they call it. So you can walk around, you can look through the windows, and there's places to go to. It's very much a ghost town, very very Western. It's amazing. But I was thinking about the gold rush at the time, like that it was a gold mining town, and it was interesting because there's no trees around. It's up in the high desert. It's part of the Sierra on the eastern slope, and it's just amazing. So I thought of the outhouses that line. There's a whole bunch of outhouses up there. I thought, well, I didn't check that one out to see if there's stock certificates inside, but there probably are.
Oh, yeah.
Something similar to that.
I've got them going all the way back to 1987 when I did my first deal. And I actually sold my company to another company, so it wasn't a loss, but I still have the stock certificates, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's all you can do because I don't even want to add up. On different projects, I made a lot of money, but I took high risks. I worked in foreign countries where the government. So I've had a lot of, severe highs and lows. So that's the joke on me, I guess.
So let's talk about California here a little bit. I just got from Linda Quinlan, I got an email, and I was going to share this with you if I get the whole thing squared away here. There we go. We're both looking at it. So I got to get a little bit larger view of it here. But this is from James Gallagher. Now, James Gallagher is in the minority. He's the minority Speaker of the House, or the Speaker of the Assembly. And it says, to Donald J. Trump, President-elect of the United States, says, as Republican leader of the California State Assembly, I am reaching out to you to extend my congratulations on your recent victory and to ask for your partnership in addressing the significant challenges facing California. Many Californians believe your leadership can help us tackle issues that have plagued California for far too long. California is grappling with a variety of problems, including devastating wildfires and escalating housing crisis. It says rising crime and unaffordable energy and gas prices. It says, additionally, there is a critical need to ensure swift accountability for criminals throughout the state. Now, this is a letter that's reaching out to the president saying, look, we're in trouble. And I've said, and I know James Gallagher, consider him a friend, except I find it interesting because he wants to partner up with the president, whereas before, 6 months ago, he didn't want to do this. I can tell you that right now.
Well, 6 months ago, he thought it was a detriment, and 6 months ago, he may not have been aware of really how much California trouble is in. I mean,
well, he lives not too far from where I'm up here in Yuba City, and this is his turf, and I think it's interesting that somehow they've just become awakened to trying to solve the problems outside of Gavin Newsom, which I find interesting because he alludes to Gavin
I think
Newsom.
they know Gavin Newsom's on his way out. I think that he's going to have some bigger fish to fry than not getting reelected because of the crimes he's committed. You and I have discussed the fact that they were taking illegal loans from the Chinese and pledging our state as collateral. So I think his problems are going to manifest over time, especially as Nancy Pelosi ages, his aunt who gets out of the primary spot. And as they see that California has dramatically turned, and they have to at least act like they give a hoot, right?
Well, isn't it interesting because you saw the map with the two red states, the one from 2020 2024. And there's no doubt, nobody's doubting this, that there's two elements that really came together to put those 10 extra counties on there. The first one is the new California state phenomena. And then as a side is the California Assembly, which has sort of been acting as a conservative wing of the California Republican Party. But the California Republican Party has done nothing to help California.
No.
Nothing. I mean, it's other than to be mean-spirited. It's just mean. They've done something, and that's mean-spiritedness. And, of course, they've been members of the Uniparty. Really.
Well, you know what I wanted to touch on a little bit today, something that's going to affect all of us, especially California, as we've got some of the largest ports, is this discussion about tariffs. And right. I've had a lot of people call me, Republicans especially. They're like, what do you think about the tariffs? So I know that we've got two different schools. Some people believe tariffs protect our economy. They prevent the inequities of fair trade because some countries are using slave labor with no environmental laws. But I believe that they can be used as a tool. As we saw, John Deere was moving its factory to Mexico, where they don't have any of the same rules or laws or regulations. And the problem that we're fighting is it's twofold. Yes, we have a world economy, and the globalists want a world economy. If you've ever been to a communist country, one area makes shoes, one area does the mining. It's all, and they can control everything that way. So this is why, if you look at tariffs, the United States federal government generated 50 to 90% of their revenue from the 1850s until 1933, when the Federal Reserve officially took us over. So they want an income tax. So they can't have us dependent on, our federal government used to run on the tariffs predominantly. So I think there's a confusion there, because tariffs can be good, like is with China, right? They were going to build the largest car manufacturing facility in Mexico. As you know, we put all the tariffs on China, which broke the Chinese economy. It did not cause inflation in the United States. We put over 150 tariffs, and it literally has destroyed the Chinese economy because they have been using us and blasting things into our market. They have more tariffs than most countries, and they have like an $823 billion tax or trade deficit with the United States and the rest of the world. So basically, our politicians who all own companies there, who are a lot of them compromised by the Communist Party, have been shipping our businesses to China, where there's no regulation, where they're using the people as slave labor. They polluted the water. Everybody's dying of Alzheimer's and all kinds of diseases there because they moved all the industry there, and they've just polluted and destroyed that country. So there are reasons, like when Trump said he was going to put tariffs on those cars and they would never sell one car from Mexico, from China into the US, they canceled that factory in Mexico. They are intentionally destroying the auto industry because all of our politicians own solar and energy companies and manufacturing facilities in China. So first they send all of our business over there, then they sell it back into the United States, they corner the market, and they destroy our economy, which is the communist primary goal. So tariffs can be used detrimentally. They can, and if used incorrectly, can cause trade wars and different issues. But tariffs are negotiating. If you have nothing to negotiate with. So for instance, you have a business and you meet someone maybe at your chamber of commerce or a business meeting, and you guys are both in similar businesses where you could give each other referrals. So you start giving this other person referrals, and over the year you give them 50 business referrals. They never give you one. How does that work? That's kind of how tariffs are, right? We allow them to blast all their stuff into our country, but they don't allow us to blast anything back into their country. And
it seems to be that way all the time.
Their economy, excuse me?
It seems to be that way all the time.
Well, and if you notice, and so there's a lot, like whenever you look up tariffs, if you just Google tariffs, it'll say they're terrible, they should never be used, never do it, it's destroyed economies. But if you look at the time frames when the Federal Reserve took power of our country,
yeah,
it totally aligns with when they removed the tariffs and said they were bad. So like I said, they want us to have a federal income tax. So they don't want us to generate money from outside because they can't destroy our economy if it's an even playing field. And of course, there is the danger that they'll be used and it will cause a trade war, but it's basically a negotiating. If the EU is going to put 2.5% tax on our auto parts, then we're going to put 2.5% tax on your auto parts. And you know what? All of a sudden, there's no more tariff anymore.
Yeah, that seems to be the answer. But Donald Trump, he put tariffs down on China, and when he was president.
Yes.
And what's to stop him from doing that again?
Well, and there still are some of the tariffs in China in place. That's
Biden left him. Biden left a lot of them in play. Biden left a lot of them in play when he became president. He didn't, take them all down.
Well, because regardless of what they say,
they worked.
They understand how economics works.
Right, it worked.
Yeah, and that tariffs was bringing a lot of money into the United States, right? I think that $500 billion or something was realized from those tariffs with China. So that was actually benefiting us. And so I think it's a fine line and they can't be used punitively, but they are a negotiating point. We always go to all of the meetings. I mean, I don't know what law school most of our politicians went to, because if you ever look at the agreements that they put together, they're terrible. They're always to the benefit of our trading partner and not us. And a lot of the trade agreements that we have with, say, Brazil and with different countries, they have never been reviewed. We put them in place and then they're there for 30, 40, 50 years when the dynamics and the economies change. They can't just be endless trade
and everything else.
And free trade has not helped us. Free trade has helped every other country but the United States. Because, I mean, I guess that's kind of a vast statement, but basically it's allowed them to sell into our industries and slowly steal all of our industries. And if you understand Russia and China and the different superpowers, their goal is to crush us. So they're subsidizing industries like the steel industry, the auto industry, to destroy ours, so they can bring about the world communist system that these people have been envisioning for 300 years.
Yeah, and they really put the pedal to the metal in 1992 with Agenda 21, and of course it's now living out, and we're having a lot of success in dismantling it, but it's going to have to really ramp up with Donald Trump as president right now, and the emergence of New California and the rest of the statehood movement. That's something that I know that the Trump administration is really looking at very keenly, because they realize, it's kind of interesting. We talk to people about the New California state movement and how important it is, urban versus rural and representation and all that stuff. And then there's other states, like now you have Illinois, and it looks like New Illinois is really coming around. I mean, they're really, really picking it up. And then all of a sudden, I got this call from one of the Trump people, and they said, "Okay, so how does this work now? This is a while back. How does this work now?" We noticed that it seems like what you're doing is that you're separating out the urban versus the rural. I said, "Well, yeah, that's what we're doing." And they said, "Well, you can do that in Illinois." And I said, "Well, sure, because Chicago and Cook County, that's just in and of itself, Illinois, and then the rest of it is so highly rural." And then they said, "Well, you could probably do that in Washington State." I said, "And better yet, we can do it in New York. Just left little old Manhattan be New York, and the rest of it, Amsterdam or New Amsterdam or whatever you want to call it." And they started realizing that. So it's kind of like they're still now really focused in on what we're doing with California and this whole statehood movement and the whole notion behind it. So that's a big focus for them. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see as we grow our economy in New California State. What does that tell the rest of the nation, and then what does it tell the rest of the world?
Well, the thing that people have to understand about inflation and tariffs is, like, right now, a lot of the reasons that we're having such high gas prices is because we've cut off, supposedly we're not buying oil from China or Russia anymore, and some other countries that we're having difficulties with. But the reality is our politicians and their relatives have just set up trading companies in India and other countries that aren't under the embargoes, and they're trading under those. Mm-hmm. Just an example, if we lowered gas 50 cents a gallon, that would be a 50 billion tax cut in our current economy. That would affect the price of our products. One of the reasons that we're having trouble competing with our projects, the dollar is still stronger than a lot of other currencies.
Yeah.
But it's also because the cost of production is so high. And like you and I have discussed, California used to be the largest manufacturing country, or city, state, whatever you want to call it, in the world. And we were exporting all kinds of things because we had access to cheap water and cheap energy. And those are the two things that can bring our economy back in the United States. So a combination of tariffs that aren't having people dump products in our country, and becoming more energy efficient is going to be key to pulling us out of this slump. Because a lot of people are excited about what's going on with Donald Trump, but the reality is our country still has a lot of things that we're going to have to face. And I think...
Go ahead.
I just think people's morale is up, and people don't feel so discombobulated and worried about the future. But the reality is that we have some things coming up, and they're probably, I'm just not sure if they're going to ever let even Donald Trump take office. Have you seen the Democrats are saying they're going to use the 14th Amendment? They released that talk that they were all having. I guess someone recorded it.
Yeah, they're struggling. These are the signs of desperation and struggle to resort to something like this, because the bottom line is that the way our country is made is that you have 2 more years down the road, you can make the change, and something like if it's a 2-year term or the 4-year term, and you can do that all day long, because what you're feeling right now are the effects of the people on the people. And if it was put to a vote like in a Senate, it would change radically, perhaps, the outcome. But a one-party system is one of the reasons why we're stalled at this right now, which we've got to get away from the one-party system.
Well, the reality is because our politicians are owned by the banking system. And that's the real battle is with the Federal Reserve, private European, New World Order banking system, and the rest of the planet. That's the battle.
It's a worldwide phenomenon.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. If you've noticed, Germany's been denying it was in a massive recession / depression for several years. Their leader finally came out and admitted it last month. And you can see people, because the Federal Reserve System is owned in the City of London and funds all of all the banks in the world. So people don't understand. Like right now, the U.S. trade, we have a $1.1 trillion trade deficit against the rest of the world. And that has been put in place by our own politicians and leaders and people and people are like, well, why would they do that? Why would they turn against their own people? P. Diddy and Jeffrey Epstein showed us the control mechanism. These people are slaves in the financial system themselves. They are also agents. That's why we see all of the different people. Like, I don't know if you see that CNN didn't give anyone raises. They've laid off hundreds of people, and they're cutting the salaries of a lot of their main people. MSNBC went up for sale the day after the election. So we're seeing a massive shift. The media is an arm of the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex is owned by the City of London, New World Order, and that includes Big Pharma. These are all systems that have been put in place to oppress us and slowly steal everything we have. And they've literally succeeded. You can go to a chart yourself and see what $100 was worth in the Depression. And today it's worth 99.999% less. $100 in the Depression now takes about $3,000 for the same item, right? If you added, the value of money over time. So this is what we're facing. We've been in massive inflation. And one of the things that happened this week, and this could be a trigger for the stock market coming crash, there was another 10-2 inversion curve in the stock market, in the bond market. The stock market is a derivative of the bond market.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market's been going crazy, but Trump's policies actually have not been good for the bond market. The last bond auctions we had for our 10 and 30-year notes, nobody showed up to purchase them.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Purchased their own notes. So this is really scary. Right now, we're at this, whenever there's been a 10-2 inversion curve, a 10-2 inversion curve means the 10-year bond is yielding less than the 2-year bond. And that's happened about 8 times over the last, maybe 8 to 10 times over the last, say, 10 years. And it's just hovering right there right now. And some people think that it's just some calculations, and it's actually, we're at the inversion curve right now. So there's a lot of things that are coming forward. People have to get active and start understanding what's really driving our economy, who really controls our politicians, and what their long-term goals are. And these people have talked about it for a long time. And right now we're watching the final battles between these power structures to see who's going to come out ahead. So we're, I think.
Okay, let's hold it, because we only have a few minutes, and I'm going to pin you down here.
Okay.
How do you see this playing out with the power structures? Just because you've worked in those countries, and you're worldly about that. You understand how these things all blend together and have to for the markets and so on. What do you see as an outcome here?
I see what we're having right now. What's been happening to us over the last few years is a direct result of these policies that were put in place for a long time. So I think people should expect a massive crash, just like we had in 2008. Some people say it's going to be bad as the Depression. So this is really what our politicians are aware what's happening. Right now, our GDP, our debt is 120% of our GDP. So What does that tell you? That means we're already broke.
Right. Here's the deal, is that what you're talking about is the Chris Street, he says the same thing.
Yes.
And I say the same thing, but I'm just kind of bringing the news to everybody, but it's pretty obvious something big is going to happen. And we've been trying to tell everybody something big is going to happen. That's why we've been kind of positioning ourselves in New California to do what we need to do to gear up and be in a position where we can bring an economy back to California first, and that being within the auspices of New California. And then, basically kind of driving the economy of the United States forward. And now, what window? See, I always pin Chris down on these. What's the window for that to really happen? And what would be the window of opportunity, the maximum window of opportunity as you would see it for New California State rising up?
If I knew that, I would be able to say, but the reality is it has to collapse before it gets better. So I believe that with Trump in office, it's going to continue to collapse regardless of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
I disagree with his plan to deregulate the banking industry. The banks already have zero reserves.
Right.
They've already been caught stealing from us. Why are we deregulating them again? And I didn't even know there was a lot of regulation on crypto. Why are we deregulating crypto? Because they're trying to give us another option. I personally don't understand crypto. It's one of those, I've still never, what are they mining? I understand that it's a supply and demand kind of thing. But I think that we're in for some tough times. That's why I think that morale is good. Everybody wants change, but nobody wants to cut their program.
Right.
This is going to be the reality. And that's why they keep saying they're going to cut Social Security, because every politician in place today knows that there's already legislation in place. When security goes broke, immediately 25% of your money that you're getting is going to be gone. This has been in place. They don't know for sure when it's going to go broke. So that's why both parties always accuse each other of it. It's in the window. They've known it for a long time. We're going to have to go just like you do. You know, when you're in a marriage, you have that final battle where you're just like, okay, I'm done. This is it. This is over. And really, that's kind of where it's going to have to be. The Federal Reserve is not federal, and there are no reserves. It's a private European bank that illegally took over our country, beginning with the Civil War, and we're fighting them now. The British powers, the ones that our ancestors came to leave, when everyone started leaving Europe and they lost the control over everyone, they had to figure out how to get mechanisms. So they came over to America and to Australia and started implementing the same kind of things that had made our relatives leave in the first place. So unfortunately, I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but the reality is that it is happening right now. If they hadn't been pumping all this money into the wars, that 90% of the money stays in the U.S. banks, the banks would have already been non-liquid. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be happening sometime in Trump's presidency, I believe.
Well, you know, one of the things that we talk about in the Sunday and the Wednesday conference calls is we're now talking about it because we are learning it from the Carter era and Reagan era, because you know, at this point in time, and we're talking about November, December into January, when Reagan was starting to take office, is that, you know, a lot of the things that Jimmy Carter had been doing, including, you know, the hostage situation and the economy, all of a sudden things started to really shake up a little bit, because you knew that the economy under Ronald Reagan was going to be a free market economy as opposed to what Jimmy Carter was offering. So it took a while, though, for policies to take shape with Ronald Reagan. And many of the policies that had been tried before, you know, using the Laffer curve to bring about free market economy in a rapid fashion like they did. So, but we're going to be faced with the same thing with Trump. He's going to have that dip, and he's going to be handling this whole big crisis initially, maybe over the first 2 years of his presidency.
Well, the reality is, remember, we started out the show talking, they have to create a collapse of the capitalist system to implement the socialist system. Right now, we're moving towards that system. As long as our country continues to take loans from a foreign bank, and they use the Mossad, the CIA, MI6, and the Five Eyes to blackmail our legislators and our bankers, we're going to be stuck in the same system. Yeah. So it's really an overhaul. We need a debt jubilee, possibly. And I think this is coming. It's hard to know what to expect because the entire world is in collapse. And this is intentionally done. And people don't understand economics, and they don't understand what's really going on. So I'm scared. I really am scared. I believe that in the long run, things are going to pan out. But we're just not educated enough about the system, and we're still looking to get bailed out without taking any responsibility for where we ended up today. It's just like when we get our credit cards in debt, we have to look at ourselves and say, hey, you know, maybe I shouldn't have been going out to dinner on vacations on my credit card. That's basically what our government's been doing.
eating out 7 nights a week. Well, listen, Simone, we got to run for time now. Tell us how we can get a hold of you, because you got your podcast and everything else. You're kind of like a regular now on Agenda 21 Radio.
Yes, I am. And thank you so much.
I love it. No, it's wonderful to have you on all the time. So tell us how we can get a hold of you, and go ahead.
My show's Lost in Translation Show. That's one word on Rumble. I'm on YouTube, and that's also Lost in Translation. One word, not one word, 3 words. I'm going to be doing some little bit of lighter content. I feel like people have really gotten exhausted So over the next month or so, I have some friends who are former NFL players, a big UCLA player, a comedian, actor, and we're going to be talking about being happy and motivational and giving some pep talks to people because we feel like there's going to be some difficult times ahead. We're even going to maybe be broadcasting with one of the NFL players directly from one of the big Pittsburgh Steelers games. So it's
awesome.
different what we normally do, but we're just trying to give people some hope and a little bit of lightheartedness because the battle is ahead of us.
Yes, it truly is. Simone, thank you very much for being with us here on Agenda 21 Radio, and we'll catch up with you.
All right, Paul. Well, thank you. Thank you, listeners.
Okay, Simone Anderson with us here on Agenda 21 Radio. It's really a privilege and an honor to have her on our show, and she participates in many new California activities, but a lot of things happening with the economy. And she's saying, and a lot of people saying the same thing, that the economy is going to crash. It's crashing now. We're seeing the signs and symptoms of it. Our job in New California is to position ourselves. Now, we've positioned ourselves, I think, pretty uniquely right now, but this is going to be a very, very serious crash. As much more serious probably certainly than 2008, and certainly much more serious than the Carter Reagan era, which was, of course, a really, really bad time for everything. Anyway, thanks for listening to Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com. We'll be tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, KMYC, 1410 AM, Marysville. You can pick us up on Live 365 from 7 to 9, or 7 to 10. And we'll also be on Rumble and Cloud Hub and all those other ones. We'll be broadcasting live just like we're doing right now. So thanks for listening to Agenda 21 Radio. And remember, stay strong, America. We are exceptional Americans.
We're sending out an SOS to the last vestiges of freedom, democracy, and the American way of life. Paul Preston with Agenda 21.
This is AENN, American Exceptionalism News Network.